When the Baltimore Orioles traded for Corbin Burnes before this season, the man who'd been the ace in Milwaukee for the last few years, there was a shift. The tide truly started to be turning in Baltimore, but mostly because of what happened just 2 days before this trade, the official sale of the team happening, being transferred to new owner David Rubenstein, something that mirrored the Mets sale. It was basically Baltimore's version of getting Steve Cohen after so many frustrating years of the previous ownership group they had, and I think this was just a coincidence. I don't think the Rubenstein sale actually had any impact on the Burnes trade, and yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it was a trade, it had nothing to do with spending money, but it was still a good momentum shift for the franchise, coincidence or not. New owner, a guy who really seems to care about investing into the team, money's not really as important to him, and the O's have a new ace. It was a big move, and it's proven to be a big move considering how the season has gone, at least until kind of lately. Through the first 2.5 months, Burnes was pretty comfortably the best starting pitcher in the American League, and maybe even in all of baseball. Through those first 2.5 months, he hadn't had any starts allowing more than 3 runs. He was everything you ask for from a starting pitcher, above and beyond, and even through the rest of June and all of July, Burnes was really good, being named an All-Star for the 4th straight season. But then has come August, and things have just not been the same, but to just say that wouldn't be enough. It's changed a lot, in such a way that's enhancing his overall declining trends even more, and because of this, Corbin Burnes may be screwing himself out of millions of dollars in the process. But let's go to the origin of Corbin. Hey, that kind of rhymed. Anyway, in 2019, Burnes was awful, giving up 17 home runs in just 49 innings. Just to give some context on how many home runs that is in that span of time, Burnes has averaged just about 20 homers the last 3 years and an average of about 180 innings pitched. His strikeout stuff was actually great, but he gave up almost 20 homers in 4 times less innings in 2018 than it's been the last few years. Just straight up getting crushed out there. But 2020 was when he started finding himself on the mound. He appeared in 12 games, 9 of them being starts, and was great. His strikeout stuff was even better, but more importantly, in more than 10 innings pitched than he did in 2019, throwing about 60 in 2020, Burnes allowed just 2 home runs. 2! 2020 was a very forgettable year for many reasons for a lot of teams and players, but Burnes obviously figured it out, and this was a preview for what would end up being one of the greatest pitching seasons in history in 2021, when he had the lowest ERA in the league, and he had the lowest ERA while getting unlucky, because his FIP, which is basically your ERA if luck isn't factored in, that's what that stat is, was almost an entire run less than that. He pitched 167 innings, allowed just 7 home runs, which is an average of 0.4 home runs per 9 innings, also the lowest in baseball, to go with a 12.6 strikeouts per 9 ratio, the lowest in baseball, winning the Cy Young Award and getting MVP votes. There's no getting better and more dominant, really, than what Burnes did in 2021, so regression is always, of course, expected afterward, but he hasn't stopped being good. You can argue in ways he was even better in 2022 because he threw almost 30 more innings, that's always valuable. He also struck out the most hitters in the National League, and his ERA was still under 3. There were a lot of great candidates for the award that year, so he finished all the way in 7th in the Cy Young voting, but was still awesome. He was good again in 2023, but this was when some of the trends we see today happening started, which we'll get into. But he wasn't far off from 200 innings again. It was overall a very solid year, but one that didn't end well, with the D-backs tagging him for 3 home runs in the first wildcard game. The Brewers get swept out of October, and that was it for his time in Milwaukee. Again, his Orioles career started off hot this year and has mostly been great, but August was not. Let's go through it. The first game was kind of weird. Burnes started out alright, nothing bad, but then a couple of hits, stolen bases, and error of his own led to some runs for Cleveland. Burnes even got bailed out by the umpire multiple times, but it didn't help the final blow from happening, a 3-run bomb off the bat of Josh Naylor after Burnes tried to drop a 2-0 changeup in the zone. The Orioles won this game, and Burnes was credited with the win, but it of course was not a great start at all. His next start was much better in terms of a stat line. He gave up 3 runs in 6 innings on just 4 hits, even taking a no-hitter into the 5th inning. But that's when things started to unravel, and you'll start to realize, if you haven't already, that the Rays, like Cleveland, had fun taking bases throughout Burnes' start. And like the Cleveland game, the Rays scored runs from it, but even more blatantly this time. And although it was an overall good start for Burnes, just looking at the box score, there was some really good contact against him this game. Some that went for hits, but also some that didn't, that just go for outs. But That's of course not ideal and sustainable to be successful, and his next 3 starts have proven exactly that. Next up, back home against the Red Sox, and Boston just absolutely feasted on Burns. They didn't have to swipe any bags to get something going. The first inning was a little unlucky. There was only one truly well-hit baseball that led to an RBI double, but the other run-scoring hit was a pop-up, striking out 2 to end the inning. He'd give up a rocket to Durant for a double in the second, and then comes the third when everything started to unravel a bit. A rocket up the middle for a hit. Devers then gets another extra base hit, but there's no unluckiness to this one, smoking it out for a 2-run homer. That's 4 runs off Burns. It would only unravel even further in the fourth. After a couple of walks, Connor Wong just grounds it where they ain't before Masataka Yoshida smokes one out for yet another home run. That's 8 off of Burns in what would end up being just a 4-inning outing. Next up, Houston. Burns has a haircut since the last we saw him. Let's shake things up, and this started out great, actually. A quick first inning, another 1-2-3 second with a punchy to end it, a walk to start the third that's immediately followed by a double play, then a strikeout looking. 3 solid innings to begin until a leadoff walk to Altuve to begin the fourth, and instead of a double play following, Burns, who tries to pick Altuve off at first, ends up balking on the second attempt. Yordan then rockets one into right field to score him. With 2 outs, Ben Gamel rockets one into center, 2-0. After a scoreless fifth, Alex Bregman gets jammed but lofts it for a hit to left, force out to second for an out. There's now 2 outs, runners on the corners, and Ben Gamel comes through again. Then a bunt drop that Burns throws down the first baseline and into right field. Another run scores before Shea Whitcomb smokes one into center for 2 more. That's now 6 runs off Burns. He's taken out, and it was at this moment that he knew, God damn it, an iTALK Studios video is coming. And hey, maybe there wouldn't have been if he came back to dominate the Dodgers his next start, but that didn't happen. Even though he ended August off with just 1 earned run in LA, he was much worse than that. It's Ohtani and decoy bobblehead day at the ballpark. Everyone is happy, and unfortunately for Burns, Ohtani read the room, hitting a home run in the first inning. A couple of rockets, including another by Shohei, would begin the third to set up a Mookie Betts RBI single. Mookie and Shohei swipe a couple of bags. Teoscar Hernandez tries to kill Ohtani at third for some reason, but then straightens it out for a 3-run blast, 5 runs off Burns. They'd eventually get another to make it 6 after another Shohei rocket for a fielder's choice, only for Ohtani to go from first to third on another steal and also a wild pitch this time, then home on a grounder. 6 runs off Burns, but only one of them, the Ohtani first inning home run, was earned. That doesn't stop the reality that Burns gave up more hard hit balls, including a 3-run bomb. The Dodgers also racked up 4 stolen bases against Burns, which, as you can tell by this point, is a trend and not a good one. Corbin Burns now has the most stolen bases allowed in a single season in Orioles history. He's allowed 37 of them and is on pace to allow 44, which would only be less than 2 pitchers in MLB this century. He's allowing tons of stolen bags, hard hit balls, and although his ERA is still good, his FIP is higher, just like it was last year. His strikeout numbers are also continuing to decline, this time by a whole strikeout less on average than last year, a year that was already down for him in strikeouts. So none of this is promising for someone about to hit the free agent market and undoubtedly looking for a big payday. Scott Boras is his agent, and you gotta think he'll have similar issues to the ones he had this last offseason with other clients of his. Pitchers in general are less appealing than they once were to have long term because of the insane rising probability elbow issues will come up. So that's number 1, but also Burns has been into decline in almost every aspect for a couple of years now. He's still a good pitcher, but we seem to be far removed from his 2021 version, someone who was more of a strikeout machine who didn't allow many base runners. He seems to be getting more lucky now than ever, and even with that luck, he's not doing well lately. The month of August saw Burns with an ERA over 7, 5 homers allowed, hitters hitting over 300, and again, this is with things like the Teoscar Hernandez homer not being counted toward his earned runs. You could have made an argument that even with his declining strikeout ability, Burns was still having a season that could warrant a $200+ million contract. But now, after this last month, that's not at all a valid take, and it's hard to see any team willing to give him what he and Boras will likely be looking for. I can maybe see a high AAV, a high annual salary, like maybe a 3 or 4 year deal worth $90 or $120 million, so $30 a year, just paying him good money in the short term, but I most definitely cannot see any team willing to go a lot of years for Burns for that amount. It's just not smart when you see the way things are trending. Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for watching.